and welcome to another episode of The Buzzer Race. I'm your host, Nikhil Ranjan, and for today, we have Chris Sloan, a co-creator of the World Series of Certamen. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, I've been starting to do this again. I used to do this before, of talking about something really topical and relevant to the interviewee at hand. So for you, I got to know, what is your favorite bird and why?
Yeah, I will tell you, and if you can enable my screen sharing,
Oh,
I can
yes.
show it to you.
Let me do that. All right, there you go. I think you should be able to share now.
All right, so my favorite bird is this guy, which is called the Bermuda Petrel, and it requires a little explanation, but the short version is it is what's called a Lazarus species. So this bird was thought to be extinct for over 330 years before it was rediscovered in Bermuda in the 1940s, at which point there were probably less than 20 of them remaining in the wild. And in fact, as a little bit of trivia for you, it might be the subject of the first piece of endangered species legislation in world history, when there was an act passed to protect it in Bermuda in the early 1600s. And then a gentleman in Bermuda who was 11 or 13 at the time participated in the rediscovery in the 1940s, made it his life to save this bird, and essentially succeeded. I mean, there's hundreds of them now, and the population's growing. You can actually occasionally find them off the coast of the U.S. I've seen them a few times there, and I just love it. It's because it's a great success story in the conservation world, and unfortunately we have too many stories that go the other way.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Not what I was expecting. I mean, I don't really know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting such a cool, I guess, I don't know. I don't want to say not a cool
You weren't expecting
story,
a seabird.
but yeah, I just didn't see it coming, but that was cool. That's very deep. All right, now we switch to Certamen, the big topic. So the first thing I really want to focus on is always starting small, starting at the local scene. And so you're from Tennessee, and I wanted to talk about what was that scene like at the time? Was it much of a city scene? Was it like a state scene? And what was it just like getting with that community and going to state and national conventions?
Yeah, so it was really sort of a life-altering thing for me, and I'll explain more. But at that point in time, I mean, the talent was mostly concentrated in Clarksville, Tennessee, which is just about an hour northwest of Nashville, and Memphis, Tennessee. There were a lot of good players coming out of Memphis. That's not to say that players didn't come from other parts of the state, but that's where the very experienced Latin teachers were located. That's where, Clarksville was Kay and Grady Warren, who are obviously, legends in the Certamen world. And a lot of their kids really were the kids that were doing well for Tennessee. So folks like Ed and Laura Long were students of Kay and Grady. My wife, Shannon, was a student of Kay and Grady, and that's how I met her. And I was a student of Nancy Howell, who's also a legend here in Nashville. And she went to high school with either Grady or Kay. I can't remember which one. And then you had some fantastic Latin programs and Latin teachers over in Memphis as well. So what typically would happen was we would have a mid-state tournament, which is basically just Middle Tennessee, where my school, which we had a lot of really smart kids, but I was the only one that really knew how to play Certamen as opposed to just knowing stuff about Latin. So it was really me against the kids from the Clarksville schools in that tournament. And so it kind of a funny story there, but it was like, I was just playing because I had fun. I mean, I loved every form of buzzer competition you could imagine. I mean, I did Quiz Bowl in college, in high school also. I did it in college. I did it in law school. I ran a bunch of, Certamen tournaments, but also a bunch of high school, college, and even a couple of open, college bowl or quiz bowl tournaments. So any form of buzzer competition, I was down for. I was just playing because I had fun. And what I didn't realize is that and there's a little bit of a symmetry here to where I think Certamen culture has kind of gone over the last 10 or 15 years. But But a lot of the kids from the Clarksville programs, for different reasons, not really necessarily because of the way they were taught, but for other reasons, just felt this pressure to do really well at it, and they were very competitive. They sometimes didn't handle it well if they felt like they disappointed Kay and Grady, which really is again not an indication of how they ran the program or taught those kids. It's an indication of how much those kids love Kay and Grady. And so there was a stress factor on their side, which was sort of unimaginable to me until that first summer when I was trying out to be on the nationals team. And like these people that I'd been playing against, I was playing with them. And we had these different misconceptions about what each other were going to be like. And it like in the first 5 questions, we were suddenly the best of friends. And it was a really special thing for me because it sort of opened me up to a world and a group of friends that I related to in a lot of ways, a lot more than the people I was in school with. But then so that was the mid-state tournament. And then we would go to the state tournament where there would usually be a really strong team from like Memphis University School or somewhere down there. And then after that, the process has changed over the years. But back then, since most of the Certamen players were coming out of Clarksville, then we would practice there, once a week during the summer. And then at some point, like the kids that were going to be competing from Memphis would come up and we would have like kind of almost like an informal tryouts kind of thing and put the teams together from there. So, I having Nancy as my teacher, and then, I was really adopted into the Kay and Grady Warren program. It was great for me. And then, when you come from those 3 as your main influences, and you're at nationals, like everybody's interested, and it opened up a whole world of friendships and relationships for me that set a foundation that has altered the course of my life. I mean, I'm married to a JCLer that I met from Kay's program. My 3 closest friends in the world are all friends that I met at NJCL conventions. Dave Jackson, Ken Andino, and Generosa, Sanko Jackson, they're like family to me. And I owe that to JCL. So it meant a lot. But it all started with getting involved in Certamen.
Yeah. That seems to always be the critical point is getting Certamen, maybe playing at nationals or 2, and then all of a sudden it just all starts happening.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah. So I wanted to focus on the story just because it is one, and I want you to share it. So your junior year nationals just saw the most insane fiasco I've heard of, and it's really cool because it brought up a rule that I think is is neat. Like this is the story behind it. So if you're willing to share that.
Yeah. So this was at Emory University in 1995. Is that right? Sorry, 1991. And Tennessee had teams in all 3 finals, and I was on the upper team or advanced. And our first year team played and won it down 5, won it with an incredible buzz on toss up 20 by the captain to take the lead and win the game. And then, so they're celebrating, and we played the entire intermediate game, which, by the way, a similar thing happened. Our guys won it late, and then there was immediately a protest about a question late in the round. I don't think it was the last question, but it was late in the round. And that protest was immediately adjudicated in favor of the other team. And I can't remember whether that flat out changed the outcome for the intermediate team or they had to do a playoff. I think it changed the outcome, but theirs happened not long after the round. But the real travesty, in my opinion, was the novice kids spent that entire round thinking they just won it under those incredible circumstances, only to find out after the intermediate team had won and then lost that there was a protest that had been ruled against them that put them into a tie, and they had to come back and play a tiebreaker right then. And they were in no shape. Now, I mean, that's not to take away from the Texas team that won. I mean, they were a great team. Either team could have won on a different set of questions, but our kids were in no shape to play, and they never should have been. And that round is why we have the rule that we have today, that all protests have to be submitted and adjudicated before toss-up 20 gets played. I actually think the ruling itself was wrong, but that's a completely different and sort of irrelevant argument here. I mean, the point is that, like, I was happy that the Certamen folks took the action to make sure that doesn't happen to anybody again, because one of the players on that team in particular, and actually my wife was on that team, come to think of it, but one of the players on that, or she was on the intermediate team, I can't remember, she was on one of the teams, but one of the players, I don't know that, in terms of like JCL, I don't know that she ever really recovered from that. I mean, that's a pretty unbelievable thing to happen. I will say, some of the coaches from other states, and I should add, and then my team had to play right after this. After watching all this happen, my team had to take the stage, and since 3 of the 4 of us were from Clarksville and close with all the players on those other 2 teams, I mean, we were not in the best of mindsets as well. And I don't know if we would have won, even if we were, because the team that beat us was really, really good. But I don't feel like we were given our best opportunity there. Although that is, I was a grammar player, and I never forget, like, answering a question in history on a toss-up where nobody was buzzing in, and I finally just buzzed in and guessed Julia, because it was about a female from the Roman Empire, and it was accepted without prompt, which I'm still sort of amazed by. Just tells you where Certamen is today versus back then. But yeah, that's the story. But that's the reason why we have that rule, is because of that, and it was tough for everybody to deal with at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's absurd. And it's always crazy because you hear those rules and you just think, oh yeah, I mean, that makes sense, that's good covering. Oh, yeah. And then you like find out what happened that preceded it.
Yeah, it's funny because since I went into the moderator room, like, I've seen some of those circumstances that led to rule changes, and I've even seen one that's about to get flipped back. So it's sort of getting to see how the sausage gets made in some ways. Yeah. So as you mentioned, you actually moderated after you completed your tenure of playing, and I wanted you to kind of talk more about what was your involvement like post high school graduation, like while you were in specifically in undergrad. What were you doing? Like, you were moderating at nationals. What else, like, were you all getting involved in? Yeah, so I mean, I had so many friends that were JCL connected, that I still wanted that to be a part of my life. So I kept coming to convention and got to eventually be a moderator and have had a lot of years of fun doing that. And then I went to University of Virginia for my undergrad, and so quickly got involved with the Virginia Senior Classical League up there, which at least back then ran all of a couple of the big Certamen tournaments there, and also we did a lot of the state convention stuff, like writing the tests, and so I was involved in that for a few years, including as president one year, and getting to know a lot of the Virginia sponsors and folks that are like, I was in I think I was a 4th year when Howard Chang was a first year at Virginia, and getting to be friends with him and doing stuff with him during SCL. So that was a fun way to be involved in a different state and see how they did things that was different, and get to know some other folks there. And it just continued to be a thread, for me. I mean, even though I did get a classics degree, but I didn't pursue classics as a career. I just had, I had too many friends and too many relationships in the JCL to not have it be a part of my life. And then fast forward a few years, I started playing cards with a couple of the folks from Florida, who then became my best friends, Dave and Ken and Jen. And so now it's sort of like, even though my activity in the JCL sort of slowed down a little bit, mostly just because of other commitments, like I'm closer to it than I ever was because of those relationships, because of my wife, because of Nancy Howell, who was my Latin teacher and now is a dear friend, and I see her regularly. And so it's, the JCL left a gigantic footprint on my life that you can see pretty much everywhere you turn. And I don't expect I'll ever be completely out of it. I mean, I don't think I'm going to be coming to convention every year, but I'm also still going to be coming from time to time. Mm-hmm. And I'm certainly going to continue working. I'm still, even though I'm probably not coming to convention this year, I've been working with, Jenny Luongo and Andrew Rist and some others on, rules updates. So, even if I'm not at convention this year, I'm still involved and certainly plan to continue to be, so long as they'll allow me to.
Yeah, I mean, you got to make the secret feature at this last convention, 2022, so that was fun too.
Yeah, that's right. I still can't believe that worked.
I mean, yeah, but maybe not always coming to convention, but that's not always the most important thing, right? Like, being involved with the community does not mean coming to convention, right? It's like, I mean, that's one of it, but there's a lot of other stuff, I think, that.
No, I mean, you're 100% right. I mean, and convention was a big part of my life for so many years, but it wasn't the whole deal. Mm-hmm. Now I've sort of got my focuses on different things where it's more difficult for me to do it, because the reality is that it's tough to take a week of time away from work when you're not in that world, when you're not a classics professional. And in many ways, it's sort of gotten harder because of ways they've changed the schedule that make it sort of less friendly for people who work. I mean, it used to be that convention would run like Tuesday afternoon through Sunday, which if you work is great. And now it's usually Monday through Friday. And that's not a knock on why they're doing it. I mean, for one, they're doing it to accommodate university needs, and that's something that to a certain extent is not in their control. And also, frankly, folks like me who are working professionals are such a minority in the population of the JCL that I don't think it would make a lot of sense to try to cater to what makes our life easier. I would like it if that happened, but that would be being selfish and recognizing that we're not really the target audience here. It's about the kids and the teachers, and if the schedule makes sense for the kids and the teachers and the organization, then that's that. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's always gonna be a part for me, and I think it's important for people to understand that, like, what I've gotten out of the JCL since I was a student there is so much more valuable and important to me than any ribbon I ever won as a kid.
Yeah,
I mean, it's this organization has added as much or more to me as an adult than when I was a high school student.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a good takeaway. That's important. That could have been your parting words, maybe. But anyways, I'm just figuring out. So you end up going into law school, and it seems like a tough thing to balance. And I'm wondering, like, was law a thing that you saw coming, like, the whole time this was what you were going to do? And classics was just like, and not something that you're only doing for fun or only really enjoyed and then we're like going to drop on or something, but like, was law just like this thing you saw coming as like, this is what you're going to do in the future?
No, I mean, the short answer is that it's not entirely inaccurate to say that me going to law school was a result of I wasn't ready to go out and get a job, and it seemed like the best next thing to do. And knowing, if I'd known then what I know now, I would have been much more enthusiastic about it. because I ended up in an area of the law that I thoroughly enjoy and has been very good to me, working with, tech startups and tech companies and venture capitalists and all that kind of good geeky stuff that fits so neatly into the rest of my personality. But no, it was not really planned until my 4th year at Virginia.
Okay. And was balancing going to law school, because I know law school generally has commitments like during the summer, right? You're looking for stints to kind of do in between. Was that hard to balance with JCL? Was there a break period for you, or were you able to maintain that balance?
Yeah, it wasn't that hard. I mean, the only real impact was, the second summer of law school is when you tend to do a clerkship with one or two law firms that are hopefully going to be one of them's going to be the firm that you end up getting a full-time offer from. It's sort of like their version of a trial period where you work for them for 6 weeks. And I split with 2 firms, but I had to sort of make a decision to take a week away from one of the firms to do JCL. In hindsight, it probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, but JCL was more important to me at that point, and that's what I did. And fortunately, it didn't really cause me any issues because the other firm gave me an offer, and they were the ones I wanted to work for, and the rest is history.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Okay, cool. That was just something I was like briefly curious about as like a side thing of whether that made that so difficult. So, I know I mentioned that you co-created World Series. We're going to get to it. I promise. But my big kind of wrap up on thinking about things and talking about what we've talked about so far is, so it's seemingly been through your whole time in JCL, even till now, that you're forming these lifelong relationships and friendships with people. And you mentioned that there was a lean towards it maybe having more of an you've gotten a lot more back as an adult. I'm curious if you can talk more on that, of that experience of from being a student to being an adult and making all those friends along the way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the friendships themselves are, having the friendships that I have now, with my wife and my other 3 close friends, all from JCL. I mean, that kind of speaks for itself. But I will tell you that in getting to spend the amount of time that I've spent in a lot of ways, like giving back to JCL by, spending all that time in the moderator room or, working on different things where I have a chance to both sustain and improve on an experience that meant so much to me. It's hard to see it when you're young and you're on the other side of it, but it is rewarding in its own way and in a very powerful way. And that's why I was able to keep prioritizing it, even when I was in the busy, early years of being a young lawyer trying to make a career, because, getting to be there and help shape the future and maintain what was already there. It's really, really rewarding in ways that you just can't imagine until you get a chance to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what is it, rem aku tetegisti? That's hitting it right on the the head on the nail. So nail on the head. I can never say the English, but I remember the Latin. But yeah, I think that sort of thing is I think that's a sort of reflection. Once you start doing stuff, you're like, whoa. But until you're there, it's.
The other thing I will add is that, I mean, for years, JCL was like a reunion. The national convention was, because, I had all these friends that, particularly when we were all younger and didn't have any money to travel, that would be the only time of year I would get to see these people, because I either didn't have the time or the money to do a trip with them. I mean, I'm fortunate now that I'm in a different phase of my life where, my best friends, we all get together 3 or 4 times a year in, places like New York or, Rome or whatever. And I'm very blessed that I'm able to see them more frequently now. But for a number of years, going back to NJCL was a reunion, and that was one of the biggest reasons to do it. And it wasn't just the people I was closest to, but people like Susan Shearer and Doris Kays and Kay and Grady and it goes on and on that like I would only see once a year, and it was really exciting, to be able to get together with them and know that there was a reason why I was going to get to do that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, it is definitely it definitely has a reunion vibe. So I get what you're saying. So we're switching on from all this nice, happy, sappy stuff. We're going to World Series of Certamen, baby. This is the big stuff, the big stuff. So what even inspires World Series of Certamen? What causes it to come up in the first place? Comes up around 2007?
Yeah, 2007 was the first year. So it's the genesis for it started at JCL convention in 2006, when Charlie Bergen and I were talking about, we were actually talking about other buzzer competitions. And in the Quiz Bowl world, for many years, going back to before I was even in college, there would be one or two tournaments that were just open tournaments that anybody could play. You didn't have to be a high school student. You didn't have to be a college student. Anybody could play in it. Anybody could play with whomever they wanted to. Back then, they were called Masters tournaments because the first one was actually at the University of Tennessee, sort of coincidentally, and it was called the Tennessee Masters. And it was like all of the best Quiz Bowl players around would show up and play each other. And I used to go and be a moderator for that thing just because I couldn't play with those guys, but I loved watching them play each other. And Charlie and I were talking about that, like, why hasn't anybody done that for Certamen? Like we've all talked about, wouldn't it be great to see this legendary Certamen player play this person, or these two teachers play against each other or play with each other? And it started from that idea, and it evolved a lot from where it started. I mean, the initial idea was we were going to have a pre-tournament, a pre-JCL event. So like the day or two before convention officially started, we were going to have just basically a traditional Certamen tournament and have it be like a charity thing where people would pay a little bit of an entry fee, and we'd run it like, but it was like an open tournament. And one of the biggest things that happened that changed it to where it is today is Tom Reed was the Certamen chair, and he was involved in the discussions after Charlie and I started mentioning the idea to some other people at convention. And Tom was like, you know what? We're just going to do this at convention. And so he got us on the calendar the next year and said, oh, that thing you were going to do pre-convention, you're actually going to do it at convention. And so at that point, we had 3 nights of prelims, 1 round each, and then semis and finals, just like traditional Certamen. And it was like the last event of each day. And it was insanely popular, like beyond our wildest dreams popular. There were so many kids in the rooms that some of the rooms we literally couldn't let people in because they were so full. And it had a backlash that ended up working out to our advantage. But the backlash was because it was the last event of the day, and that convention, the Certamen site, was off-site from the main convention, that lots and lots of kids were coming back late for curfew every night, just because of the logistics of getting out of the thing, not because we ran late. I'm actually proud of the fact that we pretty much never went late for that event. But what happened was the next year they slammed the whole thing into like a 3+ hour time slot on the last night opposite the dance. And I remember being so pissed when I got the news that was happening because it had been such a successful event. And I didn't really realize at the time that it was actually a really good thing, because the surprising benefit that came out of it was, and it worked out particularly well that year because the dance and World Series were more or less in the same venue. And it was astounding to me. The two things we didn't expect were how many kids were popping in and out of the dance into World Series to check and see what was going on, and there are, and I should have realized this because I was one of these kids, but there were a bunch of kids that just didn't want to go to a dance. And so suddenly that last night of convention, there was something there for them. And so it actually became even more popular that second year, even though we had to sort of scale things back a little bit. And that's kind of where it went from there. And, we had to lean into realizing that we needed to shift from a mindset of, oh, this is going to be like beat your brains out for Tommen with the best of the best, and realize that, oh, this, just like everything else at JCL, this is really about the kids, but they're watching and not playing. And so that informed, ways that we tried to shift the questions so that they were more fun for the kids. And so that's when we drifted away from the all serious all the time for Tommen to working some pop culture in there, inventing question categories like dramatic interpretation questions, which I still love to death and I wish we did more of. And started taking those kinds of liberties, adding questions that involved audience participation, all of those things. And we had to be more intentional about leaning into that, because that's really what it was about. Like the kids were coming because they wanted to see, an emoji bonus question, which was, I think Kate Hadamer and Ken Andino were the writing team for some of our best years, and they came up with some of that kind of stuff that just became, really popular. And so it took us a few years to sort of dial in, what we needed to do to balance out the questions so that it wasn't too hardcore and it wasn't too far the other way where, we strayed too far from, our classical roots. But I think we know what that formula looks like now. And it's been well. I mean, I also think that a few years ago when we allowed on a very limited basis for kids to play, for slashers to play with their sponsors, that was something we heard from a lot of people that, gosh, I wish I'd really gotten to play with my teacher at some point. And so we have to be careful because it's a slippery slope that you can go down that could really go too far in a bad direction. But I think allowing, like one student to play with one sponsor is a sort of thing that allows us to grow and give that experience in a way that's different. So, that's, we've come a long way from me and Charlie sitting in a quad at UT spray painting a $10 cane from Walmart. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, no, I think that view shift was really good because once I started like doing stuff more on the writing side, just for Certamen in general, I was like, World Series being meme is like the way to go. I was like, I am here to write all the silly questions. I like the environment. I think it also makes it like more of a spectacle in some sense. Watching.
So
like
the trick, here's the trick, and this is the thing that I have to tell the writers to focus on, because it's easy to stray too far.
Yeah.
The trick is that you need to work the meme and the pop culture into the questions in a way where there's still real like Latin or classical knowledge. And it's not always easy to do. And we've had lots of questions that I think that I've personally asked that the writers were mad at me about, where it was too far. Like the connection to classics was so attenuated that like you didn't need to know any classics to answer the question. And that's never been the goal. I mean, when you do things, where you like the emoji one is a favorite, or the where you can, put the memes up there with Latin translations and stuff like that. Dramatic interp is one that I keep coming back to, where there's classical knowledge involved, but you're doing something entertaining. Like I remember we did in Latin that whole speech from oh God, why am I'm blanking on the movie with Tom Cruise as the sports agent, Jerry Maguire, that we did the whole "You Had Me at Hello" speech in Latin. And it was basically like, when you recognize this scene from a famous, dramatic work, buzz in and speaking to someone in the room, like give the last line in English. And I mean, it went on forever. We did a huge chunk of that scene. And there was one room, I swear, somebody buzzed in before the first Latin sentence was out and walked over to another teacher and said, "You had me at hello." And like that kind of stuff is absolutely priceless because it perfectly encapsulates like everything that the World Series should be, because they were listening to Latin, but they had to know the movie. And for somebody to get it, that quickly was just like, I was constantly amazed at stuff. Or where we did what I call stunt toss-ups, and Kate Hattemer was always the best at this, like where it was like you had to decline hick high coke backwards in under some amount of time.
Okay.
And things like that. I mean, there were a whole bunch of stuff like that where I thought the writers just absolutely nailed it. But it's hard to strike that balance.
Yeah, the balance is important.
I think, if you go through the rounds over the years, we sort of meander around a bit in terms of that. But our best stuff are when we do things like that, or like this was Ken's brainchild, but like we had a finals round where we were going to have an emoji bonus, which we knew everybody wanted. But what we did was we printed out the bonus and we hid it under every single chair in that auditorium.
Oh, okay.
And then when it got to that question, Ken stood up and said, before they read the toss-up, he said, "Everybody reach under your chairs." And then he did his best Oprah impression, which is, "You get a bonus visual, you get a visual, you get a visual." And everybody went crazy. And then they did the question, like that kind of stuff where we get to really play with the audience is where we shine. And it's why I think World Series is going to be around for a long time, because I think that I jokingly tell people that we're the fun side of the comic. And I'll add one other thing. I mean, because I occasionally get asked from people about whether they can use the name World Series of Certamen for an event, and that like I have some sort of proprietary claim on it, which I guess since I'm in part an IP lawyer, that's appropriate. But the answer is use it to your heart's content. I did come up with the name, but I view the World Series as a type of round, not as a proprietary format. And I love it when I see state conventions offering a World Series of Certamen event. I absolutely love it. So more of it, please. And you don't need to ask for my permission.
Yeah, I mean, they were afraid of being sued, they had to,
I guess, by the greedy, soulless corporate lawyer.
So you've touched most of the things I wanted to talk about, but the final bit I wanted to talk about with the World Series is like, what do you hope to see for the game moving forward? Is it like, because you mentioned there's a sort of ideal, right, in terms of question types, what they're covering, how they do it. Is it kind of like that's the like place that World Series, like as long as it can be in that place, is good, or is there something more that you're maybe wanting to see?
What I want is I want two things. Okay, one is I want everybody in the room to have a smile on their face after the round and feel like they just had a fun experience. And I'll be honest with you, I felt like one of the rounds this year really missed the mark in that respect. I mean, it was kind of a grind. But that's okay. I mean, there's part of that is also just me doing a better job of sort of passing on to different people who are running the event when I'm not there, how to, I can relate because I had to figure that out myself. But I think I want everybody to have a smile on their face at the end of the round and think that was fun. And I want you to think it was fun whether you were in the game or in the audience. And the biggest thing is I want more people to play, and I want more people to understand that it is intended to be an event for fun and not yes, people are going to play it and people are going to be excited to win it, but that's not what it's about. And by the way, we've had instances in the past where like we had teams that were eliminated before the semis, but they wanted to play the semifinal round against a different team. That's the kind of stuff I want. And I want to see more people playing with different people and making new friends out of it, because it's a great way and I'll tell you, I'll give a good shout out to Howard Chang, who I think kind of started that. William Lee did too, but neither of them's really played in a few years. But when the first few years of World Series, those guys did a very concerted effort at like constantly finding other Certamen players to play with, that people that they didn't know or hadn't played with, and I really loved that because that was part of the idea. I mean, we sort of tried to put rules in place to prevent, dynasties from coming together, but that's the right idea. Like they would say, hey, I know this person, I want to play with this person, and they would go make it happen. But I'd love to see more people playing with people they haven't played with or haven't even met. I mean, we will always find a place to play for anybody who wants to play. Yeah. So even if you don't have people to play with and you just want to show up and play, I promise you, we will find a place to play. We have never once, in the entire history of the event, turned anyone away.
Time to start randomizing teams last second, just being like, boom.
I mean, we've thought about it, believe me.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I think this has captured World Series really well. And I think that's truly kind of the ideal form of World Series in a lot of ways. I enjoyed watching it. Every Nationals I went to, I was always watching it being like, what? How do they, what? Like, I think it was 2015 Nationals. They had to do like the Journey to Brindisium from Horace. And I was like, why does anyone know this much of it? I was just so like disturbed because I was a novice at the time. I was so disturbed. I was like, how do you know this much about Latin?
I will tell you, every year I'm impressed by some of the stuff that some of those sponsors and former players know.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Because I can't tell you how many times we've written questions where I'm like, nobody's going to get that. And then somebody gets it.
Yeah. Like no one's going to get this first line. What just happened? Yeah, that's an absolute classic. With that, I mean, I think it's a really nice note to kind of reach our closing bit on. So this is where I leave the floor. I mean, I guess I've been leaving the floor to you often. Is that how an interview goes? But I leave the floor to you once more of like these final words reflecting on, our conversation, your time in Latin, the JCL, and just like not necessarily advice, but just, I mean, you can give advice, obviously, but just kind of like, what do you want people to take away from being in JCL and Latin and stuff?
Yeah, the big thing I would tell people is that to understand that your time as a student, when it ends, does not have to be the end of your journey in the JCL. And in fact, for many folks like me, it was just the beginning of what has been an ongoing and wonderful journey in the world of classics. So, think about the possibility, if you haven't before, that you're going to keep coming back, and think about what you want to do as a chaperone or a future sponsor, and think about how you and your group of friends can use that as an opportunity to get together and hang out every year, because it doesn't have to end. And in fact, folks who decide that their journey doesn't end when their high school days end are what keeps this organization alive and vibrant.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no better way to say it. Yeah, well, with that, I mean, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's been a fun conversation. I enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you and some of the viewers at a future World Series of Certamen.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. All right, take care.
All right, thanks.